Hello, everybody, and welcome to North 100 at Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. I'm joined by a Jer.
Hello.
An Alex.
It's free real estate.
And a Ben.
I breathe in toxins every day.
You should get that checked. Reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon, over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. And also a change. Welcome to those of you watching over at the LRRMTG YouTube channel. If you're listening via podcast, surprise, we have a new YouTube channel. It's where all of our Magic content is going to go. Check it out. And if you found yourself here by mistake, maybe follow the channel. There's going to be a lot of really good Magic content here, including the future home of North 100. And fret not if you're looking for past episodes. Heather, who is very good at YouTube stuff, will make some type of playlist thingy so you can find everything.
Also, please like, share, and subscribe.
What Beach said.
Slap that subscribe button.
So let's talk about the best card that you're not playing. Up today is me, and I want to talk about a special card from the Workshop Weenie archetype, a little something called the Thopter Engineer. 3 mana, 1/3, human artificer for 2 and a red. When it enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. And probably the most important line of text on this card, artifact creatures you control have haste. It is amazing how fast, the difference that this card being in play changes the game. Your opponent will be like, all right, 1/3, you get a 1/1K, whatever, and then all of your threats are suddenly very zoomy. The one downside about this card, Workshop Weenie, is you can't cast it off of Workshop, but some cards have to play a supporting role, and nothing makes a Hovermere more threatening than it coming down with haste.
So it's not remotely true.
You know what this card is hot in?
Go on.
The red-black artifact reanimator deck I've been sort of poking away at.
Ooh!
It's
The magical Christmas land of Blightsteel being
pretty dumb.
fruit.
Well, because not only does it give all your threats haste, it also comes with an extra body that you could sack to, I don't know, Goblin Welder, Recurring Nightmare,
Okay,
stuff like that.
That's pretty hot.
Victimize.
Even though you can't cast this off Mishra's Workshop, it still has Ancient Tomb mana. And sometimes having Ancient Tomb mana is more important than Workshop mana.
Yeah. So one of the things I struggle with in these Workshop decks are what cards do you put in that play those role players that you don't get on your God starts off your Workshop hands but are really important. And I think this humble little uncommon from, is that Kaladesh or Aether Revolt? Origins. It's not even from Kaladesh.
This card's so hot.
Technically, the character depicted takes place on Kaladesh.
Yeah, that's why I was searching for the card and I couldn't find it. I don't know. This card is rad, and think about it in all of your artifact strategies. So let's talk about today's theme. Today we are talking about points, sort of a high-level discussion. And it's worth mentioning, if we're going to talk about points, the points list has changed recently. Jer and or Wheeler, y'all want to take it away?
Rather drastically. Yeah, so I'll do 2, and Ben can do 2.
Sure.
I'll take Demonic Tutor and Mana Crypt. Split them up nice and logical. Demonic Tutor went up from 3 to 4. It's a very good card, and it was getting played probably a little too much. And just almost every combo deck was a Demonic Tutor, often plus Lotus, but every combo deck you basically just started with Demonic Tutor. And
You know what's a drag about the perfectly reasonable pointing of this card is that it has to get pointed because it gets played so much in combo, and then you will never have fair tutor.
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
I was actually literally just about to get to that. And Fair Tutor, although it was a good tool for the decks to use, it didn't actually make play patterns more interesting. It didn't make games more interesting. It often just led to the fair decks getting whatever card they needed to just absolutely lock out the game and make it an uninteractive game. So instead of Demonic Tutor, the fair decks are playing more value-oriented cards as opposed to just playing a tutor to get a haymaker that just ends the game on the spot. And Mana Crypt, I'm sure Ben will pile onto this with one of the other cards we're talking about, but the fast mana was too good for quite a while. he did the Ancient Tomb mana, but that can also be Mana Crypt mana.
Yeah.
And the whole medium deck series,
Medium was a
That.
little bit too not medium, maybe a little too spicy.
Yeah,
Needed
we
to
like
tone
it.
it down a bit.
We like it
Medium well.
medium in name and in quality, and it was a little too close to good.
So to recap, Demonic Tutor from 3 to 4, and Mana Crypt went from
3 to 4.
3 to 4 as well. All right, what are the other points changes?
And the other points changes are Soul Ring going from 3 to 4, which again is a card that has a couple of roles. I mean, pound for pound, it's one of the most powerful cards that you can play in the game of Magic.
Yeah, I mean, in Powered Cube, lots of like experienced Cube players advocate for taking Soul Ring over Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall.
Like, consider how they fixed that card in the form of Worn Power Stone.
Still good.
Yeah. But does it enter tapped?
Power Stone does.
Yeah, Worn
Yeah.
Power Stone, 2 more mana enters tapped. Same
Still-
effect.
Still
Still
playable.
Yeah.
It's just the
Ridiculous.
decks that get to benefit from the Soul Ring, it again doesn't lead to the best play patterns, or at least the play patterns that really get people playing Magic, in the sense that either they are so overwhelmingly powerful from the medium decks, just pooping out dragons and Eldrazi and Hydras and whatnot, way ahead of the curve. Other decks throwing down planeswalkers and whatever it may be, game-ending threats. It basically just speeds up the game to a level that it doesn't lead to much magic. And then another card that is on the points list. This is a new addition to the points list that we haven't done since Spell Seeker, which is like a year ago. And it's Crop Rotation. So Crop Rotation went from 0 to 1 point. It's an instant speed flexible tutor at 1 mana that is able to pack either a variety of things. It either can find a way of locking your opponent out of the game immediately, or not immediately, over the course of the next couple turns, through Strip and Wasteland and other land shenanigans like that. It can set up disgustingly fast bursts of mana through Tolarian Academy, and Gaia's Cradle presents a indestructible flying 2020 demon merit
Everything you're
lodge.
saying sounds so good.
Yeah.
I don't believe she's a demon. I believe she's a horror subtype.
I swear to God. And
Avatar.
And then you come to the other things where it's just like, oh, and then you can also just find whatever utility land you need at any given time, at a very low cost. This card I feel has like been a bit of a long time coming. It's just so powerful, so flexible, and I have been loving it at one point. It was a card that I was like, okay, well, I'm probably cutting. I'll cut it from this deck, and keep it in these. And then I was like, no, I'm just keeping it. I'm just keeping it in
This
all these
card's
different decks.
Only destined to get better as time goes on, as it like gains access to better lands, right?
Yeah, it's this. You'll find a lot of those cards from like Urza's block, especially where they have these kind of niche effects, or at the time seem niche, like Goblin Matron. It's like, what other goblins could we possibly find? And it's, oh right, 20 years down the line, they printed more goblins.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a card that fits into so many different decks and reduces, again, the amount of magic people actually end up playing.
So let's talk about our theme for today. We're going to be talking about points, but we want to focus on a very specific part of deck building, which is what pointed cards do you put in your deck? And we want to talk about points pillars. We want to talk about these expensive cards that may or may not have a home in your deck, and when and why. And for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to be excluding build-around cards. So for example, Academy. What deck does Tolarian Academy go into? Well, the Academy deck. What deck plays Protein Hulk? Hulk decks.
Protean.
Which Hulk?
Protein?
Protean.
Don't whatever, the Hulk. So we'll,
Hulk.
those ones are a little bit more straightforward, but in these cases, if you have a powerful card, when do you play it, when do you not play it? And let's start off with something near and dear to Jer's heart, and maybe some of ours. Let's talk about blue decks. So when we're talking about blue, we're talking about some of the most powerful cards and pointed cards that we have in the format, cards like Ancestral Recall and Time Walk. Now, Recall is 7 points. That's 7 out of 10 of the points available in your list. Time Walk is 6. Both are really good. What makes a Recall deck? What makes a Time Walk deck? Why would you play one or the other? Or maybe go for a flatter point spread? The room.
You set up Jer and then looked at me. So.
Oh, yeah, I was like, I mean, I have
Yeah,
some
so
thoughts.
Recall is more... We've talked about this a million times, but Recall has a lower ceiling, higher floor. It's better. It's like less variable. It's always very good to cast. It's often going to win you the game, whereas Time Walk, there are times where it literally just wins you the game on the spot, and not many other cards would.
What about the old
it has,
Time Walk to Explore? You just
was
like 2
about to say,
mana, play a land past yourself.
It has combo aspects. However, the floor on Time Walk is much lower. There are times when Time Walk is certainly not winning you the game, and for a 6-point card, it's just very swingy. So you need to keep in mind deck building more when playing Time Walk, and you often see Time Walk in less blue decks. Because Time Walk is good with having a board presence, and blue decks, like very blue decks, can like counter all your things.
Yeah, it's
eventually play a thing. Typically, don't have very many things on the board. Not to say Time Walk wouldn't be good in that deck. It's just they choose to.
Yeah.
play
Not
their
to be
points
too on the
elsewhere.
nose, but the timing of Time Walk, I suppose, is a little bit more important than Ancestral.
Yeah, and there's almost a third pillar in blue decks, which is, you alluded to it before, which is the flatter point spread, where you
Yeah.
just play like blue more than any other color gets to do this because blue cards are better than all the other colors cards.
So here's a high-level question, which is, if I own an Ancestral Recall, should I put it in every blue deck?
No.
No.
That was a slower no from Wheeler.
No, it's I
It
mean,
was just the no of he's answered this.
yeah, it's just like anytime that anytime that you default to a specific color spread or color combination, always playing a set of points, you're kind of doing yourself and the capabilities of the format a disservice, because there are plenty of decks that there are certainly decks where like you are a recall deck. The way that your deck is going to function is by trading 1-for-1 with very efficient spells. Hopefully you're going to beat out on like mana costs by these trades, and then you're going to recoup by recalling once, twice, 3 times a card draw.
It's always the third one.
It's always the third recall that you can't come back from, right?
Yeah, the second one you're probably dead, but the third one is just like, what's going on?
It's not the first recall
let's
that
talk
gets ya.
about it.
It's
3
not the
recalls
second recall.
or 2 planeswalkers.
It's the third
Actually,
recall.
no, 3 planeswalkers.
I've definitely been sitting across from somebody who's like, recall myself, regrowth recall, Jacevin's Prodigy, flip Jacevin's Prodigy, recall. And you're like, oh my god.
But if
Treasure Cruise.
But I think that if you sleeve up recall and you're assuming it is just generally it fits, like no deck is worse if you're just casting recall, right? But if you just slide it in and say like, oh, I'm a blue deck, I'm playing recall, like you're ignoring other options. And there are recall decks, right? That's again, it's one of the reasons why this card it would be considered a pillar. There are ways where you start at recall and then you think about what you want to do. Whereas like Time Walk, you could start with recall with like, my first build, I'm on recall, and then you're like, wait a minute, I'm really proactive, or like I'm often winning the board with this deck. Maybe I could do a little bit more. Maybe I have a better understanding of controlling the pace of the game through what's in play or what I could threaten to put in play as opposed to just reacting to everything. That's when Time Walk comes in. That's when you're able to... Time Walk, recall has definitely kills people. Again, the multiple recalls. But like, when you set up Time Walks in certain Time Walk decks... you are killing people.
Yeah.
And the game doesn't look remotely close.
No.
And to go back to recall versus Time Walk, a lot of the times when I'm building blue decks, I'm never considering, is this a recall deck or a Time Walk deck? I'm considering, is this a recall deck or flatter points? And then separately, when I'm building a deck that could include Time Walk, is this Time Walk versus flatter points? Very rarely are they considered for the same deck, in my opinion.
You feel like we've covered this is a good opening subject? Like this was the warmer. This was the intro, giving people the idea of
Time Walk vs. Recall is a pretty this could be a whole episode.
Swinging, right?
It could be a whole
Downhill
episode
from
itself. Yeah, and now we're talking about Moxen.
we are.
Boo-hoo.
So let's switch the subject then. Let's talk about fast mana, because that's another one of the big pillars of the format. When we looked at what was recently pointed, a lot of it had to be fast mana because it's degenerate and get ahead. So this used to be a more relevant comparison when Sol Ring was 3 points and Moxen were 3 points. But if you are an aggressive deck, or if you are a deck that's trying to accelerate quicker, should you be playing Moxen or Sol Ring? Again, assuming that budget is not a consideration, assuming you have access to the cards and all things being equal, why would you play one? Let's start with Alex this time. You've played aggressive decks. In Black Mold, are you a Moxen deck or a Sol Ring deck?
Absolutely Moxen, but
why?
There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
I want colored mana in a hurry. And I mean, like, it's really that simple, because like I have to hit black or green because I have a lot of starter single pips and quite a few double pips in my first, like in my 2 slot. And I can handle that because I'm a 2-color deck. But in terms of the acceleration, like I actually think Sol Ring would be not very good. Mana Crypt would not be very good. There's a handful of creatures that I could accelerate into really quickly, but in some ways they're more the utility creatures. Some of them are the ones that have haste. And I think like the simple matter of like colored versus colorless, I definitely want something that I'm going to be able to cast my spells with. So, I mean, like that's a pretty surface level example.
There's also a points discrepancy between them now.
Yeah, that's got to be tough for this conversation.
That's a little different, but
For
I
a
think
long time they were equal.
Yeah.
And so
even so, I would still be making the same call.
I think the call for this too, and maybe this is just me. I mean, I love the medium decks, don't get me wrong, but they've kind of ruined every other creature-based strategy for me, where it just seems so incredibly boring. Like, unless you're a creature combo deck.
So skip 1 drop, skip 2 drops, go 3 to 5?
Well, it's just like now, especially with this discrepancy in the points levels, instead of being like, am I playing this style of deck or this style of deck? Like, should I play Naya aggro or red green or medium red or whatever? I kind of start off with like, what do I feel will be best to capitalize on what any given metagame or a tournament may be? Do I think that I would be better off going for these haymakers off of the fast mana, the fast soul mana, or am I better off having these like really pip dense aggressive decks? That Moxen give me, and I get a wider spread with the Moxen. And you kind of have this push and pull where like a lot of Moxen decks, I mean, some of the best Mox decks in the format don't, like if you have the Mox, you're like, ugh, but like still it doesn't matter. Like if a burn deck doesn't have the Mox Ruby, you're still probably pretty scared no matter what. Right? Wow. It's just like, all right, instead of playing Goblin Guide and Fire Drink Crusader, I just played this Goblin Guide and I just still killed you on turn 4 or turn 3.
Moxes are a weird one in aggro decks because they represent like a short, very intense sprint, and I feel that its quality drops off precipitously the longer the game goes on, to the point where they become like virtually worthless.
It depends on the aggro deck, but
I mean, like, I'm talking about my experience. It's like it's like turn, 7 or 12 or something.
You're like, I want gas.
It's just like,
this is basically a land.
This is like almost worse than a land.
That's one of the things the medium style decks give you better, is they're aggressive, proactive decks. But because their like deck nature is built around having fast mana, their curves go higher, and they have like more scary things at the top end. So
you usually will have a couple of mana sinks. It depends on the deck. I know medium green has more mana sinks than red, but like if you're on the medium white decks or blue decks, can play a lot of equipment as well and have these like activated abilities that are
like
very hateful.
tricks.
Yeah, exactly. So but one last thing on the Mox decks too is that the more I've been playing with Moxen recently, is the more I'm really enjoying Moxen outside of Mox decks, outside of just like aggro or mid-range decks, like.
Well, I remember people used to play Mox in Control. You could do Island Mox Sapphire Pass, and now you have blue up. You have Counterspell Magic up on turn 1.
That's what's in my blue-eye control deck.
Damn.
Again,
Mox Sapphire spread.
Your deck doesn't get worse by including a lot of these cards, which is like if you're a control deck and you're just like, oh, I can't believe I have this Mox in my hand. What am I going to do? You don't feel bad about it, but like. Even control or like prison-y decks instead of having that super fast mana. But a lot of that has to do also with like what we're using to lock people out now.
Prison decks with Moxen and Armageddon suddenly you have a thing. Aggro decks used to play what's the 2-mana Landstone on tap artifact?
Orb.
You used to play Winter Orb.
Still do, baby.
Yeah, right.
Like
you play your
Winter Orb.
Moxen and you're not being slowed down because it's not symmetrical anymore.
Serge, you know what? Wildfire doesn't blow up.
Your Moxen. Mm-hmm. So, going back to the Moxen versus Sol Ring account, your fast deck. How big of an effect does the number of colors your deck is playing change what's happening here? Like, if you're a one-color deck or a two-color deck, when do you splash an off-color Mox versus when do you play Sol Ring?
How often do you hear someone saying they're playing medium Naya without making a bit of a joke about it? It's like once you start adding too many colors, the effectiveness of your soul mana really drops off.
When I think one of the big things about the medium decks is that they're never sacrificed. They're basically hardly ever sacrificing card quality because their mana is just like basically a given. Whereas even as soon as you add a second color and you start playing double pips of both colors because you're playing a medium style deck, you just want the highest card quality. You basically have to. Then you're already losing a bunch of games to variance because you're not going to hit double pip on time with the soul mana every time. So
off-color Moxen is something that you don't find too much, but when it does pop up, I think the question is maybe a bit more interesting now, just like with the shift of the ring and the crypt, and how a lot of the off-color Moxen, this could also be your third supporting color that you maybe have like less than 10 cards of, there's not a lot of 1-point tools that some of these decks, like I'm thinking of Goblins. Goblins is the big one.
I was
going to
say Goblins too, because Goblins, mono red, playing Mox Emerald, specifically to cast Tattermunge.
Yeah.
and
Right?
Ram game.
And right? And you're like, that's such a narrow case. And they're like, well, whatever, I'll take the acceleration regardless.
I think Goblins is black red now, but
There's a lot of really good black.
There's
goblins.
always really good black Goblins. I've been very much enjoying just Munitions Expert, just over.
That guy seems very good.
Oh, it's not bad.
So
and
let's
it's got a dope hat.
Oh, he does have a dope hat.
all right. Let's talk
Munitions
really
expert.
quick in fast mana
Hat
about
game on point.
Black Lotus. So
Are you okay?
So not even necessarily combo Lotus. If you're a mono red deck, so Ben Engineering in the latest Highlander League has been playing Black Lotus in his point spread for burn.
Love it.
Why?
Lotus Mox is just because again, like the games where you have the Lotus, the games where you have the Mox for most of these decks, they don't pop up as being too relevant. And the other ones, the other like styles, mostly when I'm thinking of this, it's mono red, mono green, I guess mono black and mono white, everything except blue, everything except mono blue, because I mean you have recall and walk and white blue available. But the strength of like a Lotus Mox deck is that while some of the other non-red ones are a lot happier and more dangerous when they have their Mox, because the green 2s and green 3s are really scary, and like the white creatures at 2, like be it Tomix, Thalia, whatever, the quicker you get them out, the harder it makes it on your opponent.
Right.
And then you throw in a Black Lotus. And like having the Black Lotus draws is disgusting. Like dealing with like, if they go like, this happened to me recently, where someone went land duress and was like, oh, well, there goes my removal spell. Like, that's weird. Take. I wonder. And then they went Lotus Rotting Regisaur. And that game did not go on for much longer. And like that's
the old 7/6 on turn 1.
That's kind of an extreme, but if you replace that 7/6 for like any combination of a 2 plus a 1 or any other 3, that's so far ahead.
Playing Nelly years ago in Highlander, he went Mountain, Black Lotus, Blood Moon. Pass.
I know what Black Lotus in these kind of like non-combo decks is like. It's like adding a critical to your arsenal. It's just like there's a small chance that I might just like, you know. You see your variance curve, and then one end is just tweaked way up.
There was a game against Noel Robin, noted green mage.
This one.
He was playing he was playing some wildfire deck. It was weird. It was un-null-like. And ironically, I was playing mono green Stompy with Lotus Mox, which is a very null deck. And it was game 2, and I had won game 1, and he was on the play. He played a tap land. I went land, Mox, Lotus, play Steel Leaf Champion, which is a 5/4 that mostly can't be blocked. And then I also played Sylvan Library.
You're like, cool.
And then I blind paid 8 life.
Fair Black Lotus.
I mean, high rolling your opponents is never a bad thing to try and do. I've made my entire Highlander career off of trying to do it.
Hey, what's up, Beach?
So if Lotus is like this powerful of a card, what is it pointed at?
7.
Oh wow.
Yeah, same as Ancestral. This is the whole theme of the idea. If you're playing one big haymaker, if you're investing a significant chunk of your deck into points, but you have the flexibility, you're a burn deck. Where do your points go, right? Do you play Strip Mine? Do you try and play a Moxen for explosive starts? Can you justify a Black Lotus?
But you're not, importantly, you're not saying, like, if I sleeve up red and, like, someone's like, what are you playing? I'm like, well, I'm on a Lotus deck. Like, that doesn't happen.
Right.
You're not a
I'm
Lotus
I'm not
deck.
on Lotus Red.
You're not a Lotus deck. You're just someone that might go like, hey, turn 1 on Crop Crasher?
Yeah. All right, let's move on to sort of the last big topic in the format when we talk about pointing things, tutors. Tutors are one of the, other than fast mana, is probably the biggest pointing philosophy behind things. What is something too degenerate? Are combo decks too consistent? Do fair decks get to free roll certain tutors or not? Let's start with Demonic Tutor, which also recently has been upped from 3 points to 4 points. When do you want to put combo deck aside? If you're a fair deck, or maybe if you are a combo deck and you want to figure out what your points are, why play Demonic Tutor? Why not play Demonic Tutor?
I mean, I love Demonic Tutor in toolkit decks. I think it's crazy good in those kind of decks. Just like the sort of rock or like Abzan style list where it's just like, what's the best thing I could possibly get right now? And a lot of the time it's going to be, a creature, but occasionally it will be like a non-creature, like a land. So, I mean, it's weird. Sometimes you just find swamp.
I've definitely Demonic Tutored for a land before, but that's a very like Allison the Rock style point spread, right? You're like, what are your points? Mox, Sol Ring, Demonic Tutor. A little bit of fast.
Not anymore.
But that's the thing. It's changed. It's absolutely changed. But that was a legitimate thing at the time. You're like, I'm playing a mid-range deck. I'm playing a toolkit deck. There might be a recurring nightmare. There might be some planeswalkers. Let's see how it figured out. So in the case of the Rock, where that philosophy has changed, why aren't you playing Demonic Tutor anymore?
Why am I not?
You still likely are. Right?
Oh. Yeah.
In those style decks, the reason it's so powerful in those style decks is because it can give you an access to interact with your opponent in matchups where you would otherwise just get hosed. Like against Academy decks, it gives you an out to like cast a mana accelerant plus Demonic Tutor on turn 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then turn 4, try to cast Gaze of Granite against your Academy opponent.
Unbelievable.
Or go get a targeted discard spell against another combo opponent.
Yeah, that one card you wish you had in that matchup, this will find.
Or go get Scavenging Ooze. And the reason is, like, the Rock doesn't play very many interactive spells against the the combo decks, the like more linear decks, but the ones they do play are often game winning. So having a card that goes and gets a game winning card is very valuable to have in the deck. And the fast mana in the deck, fast mana in green decks isn't nearly as valuable as it is in other colors.
We're also getting more and more cards that seem like that. Plague Engineers are the big one that comes to mind, where there are these cards that are based off of certain effects or certain cards from Magic's history that you wouldn't necessarily include like Engineered Plague in your deck, even if you had Tutors. And I say that knowing that people have included Engineered Plague in their decks.
Counselors and perhaps including the most experienced Highlander player
Format
of all time.
Progenitors.
Yeah, you know.
And so
Sometimes
like,
you just got to kill goblins. Okay?
yeah, hey, and like you name Elf, you name Goblin,
on the
whatever. It's pretty good. But now we have Plague Engineer, where you don't feel bad about including this kind of card in your deck.
This card's messed
no
up.
matter what. But having it as that silver bullet in certain matches is phenomenal. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a card like this. Like, again, Scavenging Ooze, all these cards that have application across a variety of archetypes, but then they really sell it against very specific matchups or board states, too.
I mean, we've mentioned a lot of creatures and hate bears here, and Demonic Tutor will find any of them. And in that sense, it's technically worse than Eladamri's Call, but it's really easy to cast. And it'll find anything else.
But the reason Demonic Tutor's now 4 points and Eladamri's Call is 0 is because, like, there are times when creatures are too slow and you need a discard spell. There are times when you need your third land to cast your Liliana on time. You need to find the Liliana to cast it on time. Like, and it's just so powerful.
It says find any card.
It's a neat card in the sense that because it's so flexible, like people always kind of think about the worst case scenario of it as well, where like pairing it with Black Lotus, bit too good, kind of homogenizes what combo is in the format, which is again one of the reasons why we saw that increase. But like even the Lotus decks aside, there are a large number of black-based combo decks, often centering around spells and packages like that, like Reanimator, Omnitel, Doomsday kind of decks, where they often start at Demonic Tutor and to a lesser extent adding Vamp or Mystical Tutor on top. And it's not always just the bada bing, bada boom combination, and certainly after the points increase, it will not be that. But it really holds up the combo decks of like, well, I know there are cards in my deck I really want to find because it's the only way I'm killing my opponent, so I better try and find them.
So I have a question to sort of start to tie this all together. When you're making a deck, what's more important, fast mana or tutors? Because the format has been sculpted in such a way now that you have to make that choice.
Depends entirely on the deck. There's different answers for different decks. Like in the Rock, I think I would play Demonic Tutor before I played any piece of fast mana. But in Medium Black, I would certainly play fast mana before I played Demonic Tutor.
I mean, it's like you're saying that like fast mana isn't quite as good in green. Like, are there any green decks that you would be playing the fast mana? Like Hoof used to play.
Lotus.
Hoof can't. Well, okay, it played Lotus when we got to free roll like natural order.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, that first Hoof tournament was just absolutely disgusting.
Cradle to the grave, we used to call it.
Yep.
Me.
Me. Me. But
Better
like,
than the name Trent gave it.
What did Trent call it?
I don't even remember.
If you say it, it'll be enshrined forever, so maybe don't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes, the old days and that dumb name. Moving on.
Great. Green decks don't mind having fast mana. They're not entirely excluded from it, but the green already packs its own tools. It's so ingrained in its color identity
That's sort of where I
to
was going
catapult
with
it
it.
forward. But I mean,
It's maybe not your first choice as far as
well,
points.
it's just like if I'm playing like a Bant Blade deck or like a Abzan Blade or a Naya Blade or a Blade deck.
Mox.
Workshop Blade.
Trips, Mox, Stoneforge, Trips, Mox, True Name, whatever it may be. Like,
Or
I'll
double
have
Mox, Stoneforge, True Name Jit.
you have the green acceleration because you get good green 3s and 2s. You get that fast mana because playing your 3-drop on turn 2 and as opposed to turn 3, so huge. And then like, sure, you might double up on having Moxen or whatnot, like on Mox plus Dork, but like you have things to use that mana for. You have mana sinks in the form of equipment, in the form of tutors and cheap spells to find creatures and then play creatures. You have extra mana when your creatures die, because that's a thing a lot of people are like, oh, right, this hand's great. But what happens if you get fork bolted? What happens if you get punched in the mouth? Like, you don't got a plan. You need that plan.
So if we were to wrap it up, I mean, it's hard. It's just like, what points should my deck play? The right ones. I mean, that's very Machiavellian, right? It's like, if your deck wins, you made the right decision. If your deck loses, you made the wrong decision. Alex.
Should you design your deck and then select points, or vice versa?
Once again, it depends on the deck.
Just throwing you all these like real difficult questions.
There are certain decks where the points are like very core to the deck. Like we talked around, build around points.
You're like, am I making an
Points
academy
cards
deck?
earlier.
Well,
Yeah.
And then like there's a certain subset of the points list that you are going to be using and a certain subset that you are not.
Does that also have to do with what kind of cards you can afford? Like physically
Yeah,
afford?
of course, but we're talking in terms of like what the optimal version of
Yeah.
a deck looks like.
And
like,
a lot of these cards, even if you extend it to like Magic Online or whatever, they are dirt cheap. Black
Yeah.
Lotus is like 3 tickets or 5 tickets or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but they're like certain decks, you will never see them without certain points, and that's fine, right? You're allowed to. These decks exist because of some of these grotesque cards from the history of Magic. But Eggs always starts off with Academy and Lotus, and now crop rotation. So you're hard locked into 9 points. But so like for that you would start at that.
What's your last point in eggs right now? Is it Spellseeker?
It's Transmute Artifact, but it's probably just going to become Mana Vault.
Okay.
Yeah. But like there are other Academy decks where sure they started Academy, but like I know Paradox, there are so many different ways that you can build it now, including cards that have just been increased in points. And you're like, oh, Soul Ring, still good.
I do like the paradox on that, which is sometimes we scold people when we're like, don't just talk about your deck by the points. And then sometimes we're like, talk about your deck by the points. It's really weird. I don't know, without that ingrained format knowledge that we're very biased of, because we've all been playing this for a long time. I mean, we can tell the difference of when that is appropriate and when that's not. So it's like, don't be tied down by the points you play unless you should be.
Something I wanted to mention that I think we've talked about before, but it seems kind of relevant in this discussion. Do you need to play all 10 points?
Nope.
I remember, the Goblin King used to crush everybody with 0 points goblins. Depends on the meta, depends on the deck.
Even beyond like budgetary reasons, there are decks where I believe it's optimal to not play all 10 points.
Yeah.
Like budgetary card availability reasons aside.
It's like if you had limitless access to everything, the best build of your deck might be
Like
7 points.
Both Ben and I own every single pointed card and have played decks that are not 10 points on purpose.
You don't need that mind twist.
Sometime in lands. So, like, honestly, if you're playing a green-red version of lands, you can be stuck on some points. I mean, now with crop rotation going up, it gets closer. But if you're not playing a blue version of lands, you're like, maybe I play Moxen, maybe I don't.
The three
Fast
biggest offenders are probably Mind Twist, Dig Through Time, and Treasure Cruise. Like often, Dig is less like. You'll probably be able to cast Dig, but when you play both of them, like you will get these you'll get these draws where you're just stuck with these cards, and you're kind of like, oh, but you're a pointed card. I should be playing you. I guess 3 mana Hymn to Torak on you, and it's like, all right, I'll kill you instead.
All right. Any closing remarks on this before we move on to our ending segment? I think we had a pretty good. I thought we
Did
put a
we
nice hat
have
on it there.
a point to make?
I think we got there, which is.
Can we scrap this entire episode after that? My God.
All right. Well, let's move then to our closing subject: powerful magic. Beej was his finger not close to the button that time, but we got there.
He was looking for black lotuses on eBay.
That's
I
fair.
See him in the
Applause.
reflection.
And up today we have Wheeler. Wheeler, tell us a tale of magic.
All right, so this one is it involves Goblin Charbelcher, one of the best decks in the format. RIP. We've lost the combination of DT Lotus. We have to do something else, folks. It's a different way of belching people out. And so the thing about Belcher is initially.
Did you say one of the best decks in the format?
One of the yes, certainly the top tier deck, best deck in the
Just
format.
let him live in his own world. It's okay.
So, anyways, I was talking to Abe Lincoln, and
I just wanted to make him double down.
so like the thing about Belcher is it was also just like an exhibition in how busted Lotus plus DT plus the Sorensen mulligan was, and it kind of carried over and was like, okay,
Like
this,
you can kill people with only 8 lands in your deck.
yeah, you
that
can,
ain't right.
and you could still. I went up back to 9 though. I think it's the right call. But you like. You
Even
could
after
just
flooding profusely.
yeah. Well, hey, that's just comes with playing a lands deck and being the key lands pilot of the format.
It's not a lands deck if there's only 9 lands.
I play so many cards that say search for a land in that deck, more than your average lands deck. You got Lay of the Land, Attune with Nature, Traverse the Ulvenwald.
All right,
Let me get to this. Let me get to this. So a lot of the time, if you feel back up against the wall and you can't stunt on them, you're just going to tendrils them. You're just going to count to 10 copies of drills and tendrils of agony them with a storm kill because you have all the same components of a storm deck. But when you feel like you're in a spot where there's no way you can lose, then you can get a little cheeky. And I was in one of these spots. There's no way that I can lose. I have a Lich's Mirror in play. For those not familiar, it's a 5-mana artifact that says if you would lose the game, instead shuffle your hand, graveyard, and all permanents you own into your library, draw 7 cards, and then your life total becomes 20. And I had a channel active, which this is a wham bam thank you man combo of it's a green sorcery that says until end of turn you can pay 1 life, and for each 1 life you're paying you add a colorless. So notably, when you Lich's Mirror, your channel doesn't go away. And
So you get a fresh 7, yep. And you can
And
float a bunch of
and
mana.
20 life.
Yeah, and I have so much. It's like a draw 7 and add 20 mana, gain 20 life. It's great. So I have this Lich's Mirror going. I've got a Goblin Charbelcher in play, and I stack it in a way, I believe, so that I cast Demonic Tutor, hold priority, belch them, hold priority, kill myself with channel so that everything resets. So I have this Tutor resolving, they're going to get belched into oblivion, and my mirror goes off. So I get a fresh 7, and lo and behold, I get another Tutor. And I already have a DT going off, right? So it's still on the stack. So then I belch them. But here's the thing. My opponent's at a very comfortable life total of like 13. So my first belch hits them for about 3. So they go to 10. And I'm like, okay, well this sucks. But I resolved the Tutor that was on the stack. Find Belcher again. Play my Belcher. And of course, I belch them. And then my Belcher hits them for 2. And so I use this other Tutor that I have to find Lich's Mirror again. And I pay through, and I'm out of colored mana at this point. And so I get another mirror going. And luckiest guy I can be, I find a Belcher in my hand. So I'm like, okay, easy. I play my Belcher, and I belch them. You know what the first card I reveal is? I believe it was a Stomping Ground. So thus doing 0 damage. For those not familiar with Belcher, by the way, it's an artifact.
But it's doubled because it's a
Oh,
mountain.
it doubles, yeah. It's an artifact that you reveal cards on the top of your deck until you hit a land, deal that much damage to any target, and if it's a mountain, the damage is doubled. So, in a deck with 8 lands at the time, I belched 3 times and did less than 7 damage to my opponent. And then I lost. The end.
Justice.
So happy.
All
Best
right.
deck in the format.
That was
All right,
that was
friends.
beautiful.
Well, that's going to be it for our episode today. Thank you very much. Again, a reminder about the new YouTube channel over at youtube.com/LRRMTG. I want to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by you with your support at the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. See ya.